I need a wife by tomorrow, or my daughter goes to an orphanage." The desperate mountain man begged the shopkeeper. She whispered one question that changed 3 broken lives forever. Subscribe to Wild Sky Stories' new emotional tales every day. The general store in Redemption Creek had seen quieter afternoons. Minerva Dalton stood behind the counter, her ink-stained fingers tallying the morning's receipts when the door swung open with enough force to rattle the jars of penny candy. The man who entered had to duck beneath the frame, his broad shoulders blocking the autumn sunlight that tried to follow him inside. She recognized him immediately, though they had never spoken. Garrett Stone, the recluse, who lived somewhere high in the pine-covered mountains beyond town. Twice a year he came down with furs to trade, spoke to no one beyond necessity, and disappeared back into the wilderness like morning fog. The children whispered he was half bare. The women whispered he was half broken. Minerva thought he simply looked tired. He approached the counter with hesitant steps, his boots leaving traces of mountain soil across her swept floor. His dark hair touched his collar, longer than was fashionable, and his beard could not hide the sharp angles of what had once been a handsome face. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, gray as winter sky, holding something desperate. "Miss Dalton," he said, his voice rough from disuse. She blinked in surprise. She had not known he knew her name. She had only arrived in Redemption Creek 8 months prior, purchasing the general store from old Mr. Henderson, with money she had saved working as a school teacher, back east, back in the life she had fled. "Mr. Stone," she replied evenly, setting down her pencil. "What can I help you with today?" He removed his hat, turning it in his hands like a man approaching the gallows. The gesture revealed the vulnerability beneath his mountain man exterior, and something in Minerva's carefully guarded heart stirred with unwanted recognition. "I need a wife by tomorrow," he said. The words hung in the air between them like smoke. Minerva's breath caught, though she kept her expression neutral. Years of hiding her thoughts had made her an expert at stillness. "That is quite a specific need," she said carefully. "Perhaps you should speak with Reverend Matthews about arranging introductions to suitable young ladies in town." "No time," Garrett said, his knuckles white against the brim of his hat. "My daughter arrives on tomorrow's afternoon train. She is 7 years old. I have never met her." Minerva felt the words like a physical touch. She leaned forward slightly, her careful neutrality slipping. "I do not understand." Garrett's jaw worked as if the explanation pained him. "Her mother was Hannah Brewster. We were to be married 7 years ago. I worked the silver mines in Colorado, saving money to buy land, to build a proper home. Hannah lived here in Redemption Creek with her family." He paused, his eyes distant. 2 weeks before our wedding, there was a collapse in the mine. I was trapped for 3 days. When they pulled me out, I was broken in ways that took months to heal. I wrote to Hannah from the hospital, told her I could not ask her to marry half a man, released her from our promise. "That was noble," Minerva said softly, though the word felt inadequate. "That was pride," Garrett corrected, bitterness edging his voice. Hannah wrote back, "I never opened the letters. There were dozens. I sent them all back unopened. When I finally healed enough to work again, I came here to the mountains, built a cabin, stayed away from everything that reminded me of the man I used to be." He set a worn envelope on the counter between them. The paper was creased from much handling, the ink faded. "This arrived 3 weeks ago, from a lawyer in St. Louis. Hannah died this spring. Fever. Before she passed, she told her daughter about me, told her I was her father." His voice cracked. "Hannah never married. She raised our child alone, because I was too stubborn and wounded to read her letters, to know she had not turned away from me, that she had been carrying my daughter when I disappeared into these mountains. Minerva's eyes burned with tears she could not shed. Not here, not now. She had learned long ago that tears were a luxury she could not afford. The child has no other family. Garrett continued. She is coming here to me, to a father she has never known, and I am a man who lives alone in a cabin with one room, who barely remembers how to speak to people, who has nothing to offer a little girl who just lost her mother. He met Minerva's eyes with raw desperation. The territorial judge was clear. He will allow her to come to me, only if I can provide a proper home. A mother, a family. If I am still unmarried when she arrives, she goes to an orphanage in San Francisco. The silence that followed was broken only by the ticking of the store's clock, counting down the hours Garrett did not have. Why me? Minerva asked, and her voice barely rose above a whisper. Because you are kind, Garrett said simply. I have watched you with the children who come into the store. You slip extra candy into their bags when their parents are not looking. You never shame the families who need credit. You recommended books to young Thomas Walker until he fell in love with reading. You are patient and gentle, and my daughter needs someone patient and gentle because her whole world has just ended. He reached into his coat and pulled out a leather pouch, setting it beside the letter. The clink of coins was unmistakable. I can pay you, he said. Everything I have. You could leave in a year if you wanted. Go anywhere. Start fresh. I am not asking for a true marriage. Just the appearance of one, for her sake. Just someone to help me not fail this child I have already abandoned once. Minerva stared at the pouch, at the letter, at this broken man offering everything he had to save a daughter he had never held. Her mind raced through calculations, through possibilities, through the careful plan she had constructed for her solitary life. Then she whispered one question. What is her name? Garrett blinked as if he had not expected those to be the words she spoke. His expression softened for the first time since entering the store. Lily, he said. Hannah named her Lily Hope. Minerva felt something crack inside her chest, felt the walls she had built so carefully begin to crumble. She thought of another little girl, years ago, who had needed someone to be patient and gentle. She thought of the failure that had driven her west, the shame that followed her still in quiet moments, the reason she had chosen a life of isolation in a town where no one knew her past. I do not want your money, she heard herself say, but I have conditions. Garrett straightened, hope flickering across his weathered features. Anything. You will never lie to Lily. Not to protect her, not to comfort her. Children know when adults are false, and they never forget a betrayal. Agreed. You will learn to speak to her even when it is difficult. Silence is its own kind of abandonment. His throat worked, but he nodded. Agreed. And you will forgive yourself, Minerva said, her voice dropping lower, because children can sense guilt, and she will believe herself to be its cause. Garrett's eyes glistened. I do not know if I can do that. Then we will learn together, Minerva said, and made her decision. I will marry you tomorrow morning. We will meet Lily together tomorrow afternoon, and we will give her the best home we know how to make. Why? Garrett asked, echoing her earl. I question. Why would you do this? Minerva smiled, sad and small. Because someone should have done it for me once, and no one did. The morning arrived, cool and clear. Autumn painting the mountains in shades of amber and gold. Reverend Matthews performed the ceremony in his small church with only his wife as witness. The Reverend's questions were evident in his eyes, but he was a kind man who had known loss himself, and he asked nothing beyond what the ceremony required. Minerva wore her best dress, a simple gray wool that matched her eyes. Garrett had clearly made an effort, his hair trimmed, his beard neat. wearing a suit that must have been stored away for years. When he slipped the ring onto her finger, a delicate silver band that had belonged to his mother, his hands trembled. "I will try to be a good husband to you," he whispered, so quietly, only she could hear. "Just be a good father to Lily," Minerva whispered back. "That is enough." They rode to Garrett's mountain cabin in a wagon loaded with Minerva's essential belongings. She had sold the general store back to Mr. Henderson, who had been secretly relieved to reclaim it. The mountain trail was steep and winding, the pine trees growing denser as they climbed. The cabin, when it came into view, was better than Minerva had expected. Garrett had spent 3 weeks preparing, he explained, haltingly. He had built an addition, creating 2 bedrooms where there had been only open space. He had constructed furniture sized for a child, a small bed, with posts carved in the shapes of forest creatures, a table where a little girl could draw or study. "I did not know what she would like," he said anxiously, showing Minerva the room. "I made what I hoped might please her." Minerva ran her hand over the bed frame, feeling the care in every smooth curve. "This is beautiful work. She will love it." They had only hours before they needed to return to town for the train. Minerva used the time to make the cabin into a home. She unpacked linens and hung curtains. She set out books and arranged wildflowers in jars. She baked bread so the cabin would smell of warmth and welcome. Garrett watched her work with something like wonder in his eyes. "You do not have to do all this," he said. "Yes," Minerva replied, kneading dough with practiced efficiency. "I do." The train arrived precisely at 3 o'clock, its whistle echoing across the valley. Minerva stood beside Garrett on the platform, her hand tucked into the crook of his arm, more for his reassurance than her own. She could feel the tremors running through him, the terror of a man facing the consequences of 7 years of chosen isolation. "Breathe," she murmured. "Just breathe." The passengers disembarked, a handful of travelers making their way into the small town. Then a conductor stepped down, turning to help a small figure to the platform. Lily Hope was tiny for 7, with Hannah's delicate features and Garrett's gray eyes. She wore a black mourning dress too large for her frame, and carried a carpet bag nearly as big as she was. Her dark hair had been braided with ribbon, but the ribbon was coming loose, wisps escaping around her solemn face. She looked so unbearably alone that Minerva felt her heart shatter. The conductor checked a paper, then looked around. "Mr. Garrett Stone." "Here," Garrett managed, his voice strangled. The conductor led Lily toward them. The little girl's eyes moved from Garrett to Minerva and back again, holding no recognition, no warmth, only the careful blankness of a child who had learned that hope was dangerous. Minerva knew that expression. She had worn it herself once. "Miss Lily," the conductor said gently, "this is your father." Garrett dropped to one knee, bringing himself to Lily's eye level. For a long moment, he simply looked at her, drinking in every detail of the daughter he had never known existed until 3 weeks ago. "Hello, Lily," he said, his voice breaking. "I am so very sorry about your mama." Lily's lower lip trembled, but she did not cry. She said, "You lived in the mountains." "I do. I have a cabin in the pines. I built you a room there. It is not much, but—" "Who is she?" Lily interrupted, looking at Minerva with those 2 old eyes. Minerva knelt as well, ignoring the dust on her dress. "My name is Minerva. I married your father yesterday. I know this is frightening and strange, and you have every right to be uncertain. But I want you to know that you are wanted here. You are not a burden or an obligation. You are a gift we do not deserve." Something flickered in Lily's expression, the first crack in her careful armor. "Mama said my father did not want us. that he sent back her letters. Garrett flinched as if struck, but he did not look away. That is true. I did send them back. I thought I was protecting your mama from having to care for someone broken. I did not know about you, but that is no excuse. I failed you both, and I will carry that shame for the rest of my life. He swallowed hard. But I am here now, and if you will let me, I would like to be your father. Not to replace your mama's memory, but to honor it by giving you the love she deserved from me all along. A tear slipped down Lily's cheek, then another. Her careful blankness crumbled, revealing the terrified, grieving child beneath. I miss her, she whispered. I know, Garrett said, his own tears falling freely now. I know you do. Lily looked at Minerva. Will you leave too? The question drove straight into the deepest wound Minerva carried. She thought of another child who had asked her a similar question years ago. A student who had trusted her, needed her. She thought of how she had failed, how her own fear and weakness had led to tragedy, how she had run rather than face what she had done. I am scared, Minerva said honestly, because people I have cared for have been hurt, and I carry blame for that. But I promise you, Lily, I will not choose to leave. I will stay and do everything I can to give you a good home. Lily studied her for a long moment, then shifted her gaze back to Garrett. Can I see the room you built? Relief washed over Garrett's face. Yes, of course. The ride up the mountain was quiet, but it was not the strained silence of strangers. Lily sat between them on the wagon bench, her small body a bridge connecting their separate islands of pain. As they climbed higher, she began to look around with cautious interest. Are there bears? She asked. Sometimes, Garrett said. But they mostly keep to themselves if you respect their space. Mama read me a story once about a girl who lived with bears. I know that story, Minerva said. Would you like me to read it to you? I brought several books. Lily nodded, something almost like hope touching her features. When they reached the cabin, Garrett lifted Lily down from the wagon with awkward gentleness, as if afraid she might break. Minerva saw the moment Lily noticed the carved animals on the porch railing, the wind chimes made from polished stones, the small rocking chair positioned to overlook the valley. You made these, Lily asked Garrett. I wanted you to feel welcome, he said. Inside, Lily explored with careful steps, touching things lightly, as if testing their reality. When she saw her bedroom, saw the carved bed and the shelves waiting for treasures, and the wildflowers Minerva had placed by the window, she turned to look at them both. This is mine, she whispered. All yours, Minerva confirmed. Lily said deed on her carpet bag and walked to the bed. She climbed onto it, ran her small hand over the carved deer on the headboard, then lay down and curled into a ball. Her shoulders began to shake with silent sobs, the grief finally finding release. Minerva moved instinctively, sitting beside her, gathering the weeping child into her arms. Lily clung to her 7 years of childhood innocence, meeting the harsh reality of mortality. And Minerva held her through it, rocking gently, murmuring wordless comfort. Garrett stood in the doorway, helpless and aching, until Minerva reached out her free hand to him. He crossed the room and knelt beside the bed, placing one large hand carefully on his daughter's shaking back. They stayed that way as the afternoon light faded to evening, 3 broken people beginning the long process of becoming a family. The days that followed were not easy. Lily's grief came in waves, unpredictable and overwhelming. She had nightmares that sent her running to Minerva's room in the darkness. She asked questions about her mother that Garrett could not answer, revealing the depth of all he had missed. But there were small victories too. The morning Lily laughed at Garrett's lopsided attempt at making pancakes. The afternoon she asked him to teach her to carve, sitting beside him on the porch, with serious concentration. The evening she called Minerva Mama Minnie without thinking, then froze in horror, and Minerva had simply smiled and said, "I like that name very much." 3 months into their unexpected family, on a cold December evening, with snow falling soft outside, Lily was finally asleep after Minerva had read her 3 stories. Garrett sat by the fire, working on a carving, and Minerva settled into the chair beside him with her mending. "I need to tell you something," Minerva said quietly. Garrett looked up, concern immediate in his eyes. "Wha? 'Tis wrong." "Nothing is wrong, but you have been honest with Lily, and I owe you the same honesty." She set down her mending, her hands folding in her lap. "I told you someone should have helped me once, and no one did. I need to tell you what I meant." She took a breath, steadying herself. "I was a school teacher in Pennsylvania. I had a student, a girl of 9 named Sarah. She was bright and sweet, but her father drank, and her home was not safe. She tried to tell me, in the way children do, with hints and frightened eyes. I saw the signs, but I was young, and afraid of making accusations against a prominent family. I told myself I was imagining things, that it was not my place to interfere." Minerva's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "One winter night, Sarah ran away from home in a blizzard, trying to reach the schoolhouse where she thought I would be. She froze to death a mile from town. They found her the next morning." Garrett set down his carving, his full attention on her. "I left Pennsylvania because I could not bear the weight of my failure," Minerva continued. "I came west to escape, to live a quiet life where I could never fail another child. When you asked me to help Lily, I was terrified, but I was more terrified of letting fear win again, of choosing safety over a child who needed someone to fight for her." "You did not fail, Sarah," Garrett said firmly. "The adults who hurt her failed. The community that looked away failed. You were young and doing your best in an impossible situation." "I tell myself that," Minerva said, tears finally falling, "but I still see her face. I still wonder if I had been braver, stronger, if she might have lived." Garrett moved from his chair to kneel before her, taking her hands in his. "Then we are both haunted by the same ghost, the ghost of who we might have been if we had chosen differently. But Minerva, we cannot change the past. We can only choose differently now." "I am choosing Lily," Minerva said. "I am choosing you, this strange, sudden family. I am choosing to stay, and I am choosing to let you see me," Garrett replied. "Not the hermit in the mountains, but the man I am trying to become, the father I want to be. The husband who is grateful every day that you whispered that question, instead of turning me away." They sat together in the firelight, holding hands, letting the weight of confession settle into something lighter. Understanding, forgiveness, the beginning of something real beneath the arrangement that had brought them together. From the doorway, neither of them noticed a small figure in a nightgown, Lily watching with sleepy eyes as her father and her Mama Minnie chose each other, chose her, chose the family they were building from broken pieces. She smiled and padded back to her carved bed, back to the home that had materialized from one desperate request and one whispered question. And for the first time since her mother died, she felt safe. In the mountains above Redemption Creek, as snow fell soft and silent, 3 hearts began to heal.